Hello, I'm Terry Carroll, CEO and co-founder of SunCatcher Passive Solar Greenhouses. SunCatcher is pleased to share with you the results of our years of passive solar greenhouse research and development. This patented design may be the missing link in your family and community's year-round food security. During the next few minutes, we'll discuss the basic design considerations that individually can improve the winter performance of any greenhouse, and collectively, all the elements work together as a well-functioning passive solar greenhouse in most any climate. An investment in a passive solar greenhouse today is like buying a greenhouse with all the propane you will need to heat your greenhouse for the next 50-some years, regardless of propane cost and availability.
So what is a passive solar greenhouse? A passive solar greenhouse is a controlled microclimate where the energy for keeping the greenhouse warm is provided solely by sunlight. It harnesses the sun's energy to use for light and heat during cold winter months instead of relying on fossil fuels and other non-renewable energy sources. Energy collected as light during the day is stored in strategically placed thermal mass units. The energy is then re-radiated as heat during the night and on cold days without the sun. Our design emphasizes protection from extreme weather events while harnessing the key elements for plant growth: sunlight with minimum phototropism, temperature control, both heat in the winter and cooling in the summer, humidity control, and CO2 enhancement during the photosynthesis process. The three basic elements of passive solar design include an efficient collection of solar energy, storage of solar energy as heat through the use of thermal mass, and the prevention of heat loss during and following collection periods. Do these passive solar greenhouses really work? Well, here's a chance to see for yourself. Here's a close-up of what's growing in the Parkway SunCatcher in February. Note these are three seasonal graphs that we're looking at here in a row. This is the winter data. Notice the bottom line, which is the outside temperature, is very much lower than the top line, which is the indoor temperatures. This was taken in a unit without any effective thermal mass or venting. Here we see the springtime graph. Notice on the left that it looked much like the winter graph before. And again, there was not effective thermal mass during that time. But note that midway through that the two graphs began to merge. And at this point, the north vents are opened and left open, and all the vents are open pretty much 24/7 during this period. This is the summertime graph, and notice that both the interior and the exterior track pretty close to each other. The vents are open during this particular period. It is notable that the temperatures do not get up in the very high temperatures like many greenhouses do during this summertime period. So what do you think? Does a passive solar greenhouse really work? Maybe even want one? Well, here's tomatoes grown from seed in March. Now to answer our question, does it really work? Let's look at a Parkway data table. The Parkway SunCatcher was our first model. As you can see by the data table, this proof of concept early model performed extremely well. As it gets colder outside, not only does the temperature difference between the interior and outside get larger, but the average interior temperature actually increases during colder periods. At one point, during the January 10 to 20 period, when the outdoor temperature dropped to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, the indoor temperature stayed a relatively warm 56 degrees. Notice when the silver tarp was used at night, that's period 4, even though there was not as much energy entering the SunCatcher during the day as measured by light and thermal mass temperature, the passive solar greenhouse maintained the same overall average temperature during that period. Does it really work? I think so. Here are some of the SunCatcher research and prototype models. We use the sun, the laws of nature, and the natural elements to provide an increase in available natural sunlight for plant growth, heat at night, and on cold, overcast days, and a CO2-rich environment for enhanced plant growth. The design acts much like a natural thermostat, producing extra heat in the winter during clear days when plants are undergoing maximum photosynthesis, so that fresh air can be introduced while excess moisture and CO2 depleted air are vented. The SunCatcher design takes advantage of the changing angles of the sun throughout the seasons to maximize solar input during winter months while minimizing solar input during summer months to reduce summertime overheating. The science principles that create the patented passive solar greenhouse design you see in the previous slide of the research and prototype SunCatchers work for all greenhouses. Here are some of the do-it-yourself projects using the SunCatcher design. SunCatchers have the ability to directly harness the sun's light energy and make it available for heating the SunCatcher at night and on overcast days. We do this through paying attention to site and orientation, insulation and type construction, our glazing material, angles and how it's set, interior and exterior colors, thermal mass, ventilation, and the profile, the magic sauce. Here you see the future site of the Parkway SunCatcher. It's marked with a yellow ribbon, and you can see it between the two red arrows, and this was taken at local solar noon. The most important part of building a new SunCatcher is the proper location and preparation of the site. The builder has several practical matters to consider, such as available tax credits, POA, type requirements, building codes, easements, as well as things such as driveways, ground percolation, site drainage, and the need to be close to other spaces such as gardens and sidewalks. Note the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and the northern hemisphere travels from the southern portion of the sky during winter months. Therefore, it's important to select a site for your passive solar greenhouse with clear southern exposure that receives sunlight all day during the winter months. This configuration maximizes winter sun penetration into the greenhouse space. This means that the long side of the greenhouse should be placed along the east-west axis, and the side that will be glazed will face toward the south. This shows the shadow of the school at the edge of the SunCatcher site. Since the winter sun is lower in the sky than the summer sun, you must check for objects south of the SunCatcher, such as trees and buildings, that will block the sun or cast a shadow on your SunCatcher. Over the shortest days of the year from mid-December to mid-January, check for shadows on the site from 9 to 3 p.m. If no shadows appear during the day, the site will work. One way to do this is to stake out the site during this particular time period and maybe even take pictures of it during different times of the day. Try it. We have found that 15 degrees east of south is the optimum orientation to maximize solar gain in the early winter morning when your passive solar greenhouse will be the coldest. This also corresponds to reducing the amount of heat in the afternoon when it's the warmest. Ideally, this 15 degree shift to the east will allow the sunlight to come in about an hour earlier in the morning when it's coldest and you need it most. Now that you have a good site, next you want to build an energy efficient envelope or shell. It doesn't matter how much heat you get into a building if the building acts thermally like a leaky bucket. So in our bucket analogy, the bucket itself will be the SunCatcher. The opening at the top would be the same as our solar aperture or our glazing. How well we insulate and construct our SunCatcher determines how much it leaks. In the middle of this, we have our thermal mass, and this acts much like a heater. In the top of the bucket, we have the sunlight or the water coming in. We have vents throughout the bucket to help regulate the temperature, and the water level represents the temperature inside the bucket. So basically, the whole idea is you can pay once to insulate and build a tight structure, or you can have ongoing high energy bills forever, much like pouring water into a leaky bucket. Insulation slows heat flow through surfaces like the walls, the floor, and the roof. The SunCatcher roof, the north-facing and the east and west-facing walls are well insulated to keep the heat loss to a minimum, since these are areas that receive little or no direct solar gain in the winter, but certainly can lose a lot of heat if not well insulated. We suggest maximum insulation in colder climates. You have to assume 100% humidity at all times. Other ways to increase the thermal efficiency of the SunCatcher shell include using the polycarbonate glazing and possibly a reflective insulating blanket in colder climates. A construction option that might significantly reduce labor costs is building the SunCatcher using the SunCatcher EcoShell kit by EcoPanels. The SunCatcher EcoShell creates a very tight, structurally sound, highly insulated, fire-retardant SunCatcher and reduces the labor and time needed for construction. The purpose of glazing is to let sunlight in and to keep the heat in. The two main greenhouse glazings include the polycarbonate plastic, which we find to be the most cost-effective option, and the polyethylene plastic, which is the cheapest option, but it has to be replaced fairly frequently. The most effective angle of the SunCatcher's glazing is to maximize solar gain is 60 degrees up from horizontal. This 60-degree angle is designed to maximize available solar energy during the coldest period of the year. Conversely, this angle minimizes incoming sunlight within the structure during the summer months. We design our SunCatchers with the glazing 60 degrees up from horizontal for two reasons. In the winter, SunCatchers are designed to capture the early morning sun rays as soon as possible. Setting the glazing at a smaller angle, that is back closer to the horizon, will reduce the amount of incoming sunlight entering the SunCatcher when it is coldest and needed the most for heat. At other times, that's spring through fall of the year, if the glazing is at a smaller angle to the horizon, laid back more, it will allow larger amounts of light in and thus heat to enter the structure when it is not needed, and it will increase the overheating of the structure when that is not desirable. In this slide, we see the high-angled summer sun is being reflected off the glazing. Light sometimes acts like a flat rock skipping across a lake. When you throw the rock straight down into the water, it just goes in the water. However, when you throw it along the surface, sometimes it skips. Light does the same thing when it strikes the surface of the glazing. When the light strikes the glazing close to perpendicular to the surface, most of the light is transmitted through the glazing, as we saw in the previous slide. As the angle of this incoming light gets more parallel to the surface, more of the light is reflected off the surface instead of being transmitted through the glazing, much like that flat rock skipping across the lake. During times when there is more sunlight entering the passive solar greenhouse than needed, one way to reduce the amount of sunlight entering the SunCatcher is to use a light-colored shade screen over the glazing to reflect some of the sun. In this summertime photo, notice the shady and cool looking inside the SunCatcher, yet you can see through the lower vents that's very sunny outside. The glazing in a passive solar greenhouse loses about 3 to 4 times more heat than all the other exterior surfaces combined. Much of this is radiant heat loss at night. You can increase the performance and efficiency of your SunCatcher in colder climates by adding a reflective thermal blanket at night to cover the glazing. Its purpose is to reduce radiant heat loss through the clear glazing at night. The curtain can be very simple, such as a silver tarp like you see here. It doesn't even have to be snug. It primarily needs to prevent the plants and thermal mass from seeing the clear winter night sky. This works much like the silver reflecting shields folk put in their car windshields in the summer, except in reverse. Now let's look at the interior dynamics of what makes the SunCatcher work. The SunCatcher interior should have light-colored reflective surfaces which reflect incoming solar radiation in the winter months back towards the plant growing space and thermal mass. This increases the amount of natural light reaching the plants compared to the amount of light that same footprint outside of the SunCatcher would normally receive during winter months. Thermal mass is used in the passive solar greenhouse to convert incoming sunlight to heat, then stores that heat until it's needed. During the night or cloudy days when interior temperatures drop, the thermal mass radiates this heat and helps maintain a suitable plant environment inside the SunCatcher, regardless of the temperatures outside the SunCatcher. The most effective forms of thermal mass for absorbing and storing solar heat are water and a product called PCM, or phase change material. Rock and masonry can be made to be very attractive, but they only store about 20% of the heat that the same volume of water will store. Thermal mass should be in containers whose walls facilitate good heat transfer. Therefore, use metal or clear containers. Don't ever use plastic containers. Thermal mass should maximize heat transfer by radiation, like a campfire or a wood stove. Flat black is best of all colors for radiation heat transfer. Red and blue light are also 90% as efficient as flat black and promotes photosynthesis, so the thermal mass can be red or blue. Thermal mass should be designed to release heat without being recharged for over 4 or 5 days minimum. This can vary by location. Large water-filled containers provide the slow cool down or energy release needed over long periods of time. Water is thermal mass. This is generally the cheapest and most effective form of thermal mass. Water-filled containers of various sizes can be added throughout a space to provide more thermal mass once you've set up your growing area. Integrating more thermal mass in your SunCatcher will reduce the temperature swings and increase stored heat for cold winter nights and cold, cloudy days. These water-filled thermal storage tubes are more attractive than your usual metal barrels, and the water can be tinted black, blue, or red and strategically placed to enhance plant growth. While water is generally the best thermal mass for the dollar, there are two possible concerns. The weight of the water must be taken into consideration, particularly with respect to the foundation and floor. For some, the space the containers require may also be a concern. Thermal mass should be insulated from floors and not touch exterior walls. Once in place and filled with water and some non-toxic anti-rust additive, you will not want to move them. After filling them with water and sealing them with good sunlight on them, it will take several days to a week for them to fully charge with enough heat energy to provide optimal performance. Here we see the phase change material mounted directly on the SunCatcher wall. The PCM absorbs a major portion of its heat during the sunny days. Then in the evenings, when the SunCatcher cools down to its preset phase change temperature, the PCM releases that stored heat, much as a heater coming on when it's most needed. There are two main concerns for the PCM. The first is simply the cost. The second is, as you see here, the material normally comes in a white plastic packaging. The best packaging would be a foil or metal packaging with a color of black, red, or blue. The optimum thermal mass system for a passive solar greenhouse will include both water that absorbs and releases radiant heat at a range of temperatures, combined with PCM that stores and releases heat at a specific temperature below which the plants won't do well. Each one serves different functions in the process. The water absorbs and releases radiant heat on an ongoing basis, while the PCM is releasing heat only in a situation where the SunCatcher is cooling down to long periods of cloud cover. The SunCatcher climate control uses a natural convective airflow created by using awning windows as both air intake vents low in the front south-facing knee wall and as exhaust vents above the doors of the SunCatcher. This venting system uses the chimney effect. This releases excess heat and humidity out of the upper exhaust vents while drawing in fresh, drier, CO2-rich air through the lower vents when needed during active photosynthesis periods. 3 ways to boost the overall system's performance include using shade cloths to reduce the amount of sunlight entering the structure as needed. Ceiling fans can boost air circulation, and vents can be automated. Everything is correlated to the amount of sunlight each day. If it is a clear, sunny day, the SunCatcher will maximize solar heating, regardless of the temperature outside. When the interior reaches its desired temperature, the vents are open, the excess heat and humidity are released, and fresh air, CO2-rich air, is brought in. On days with less than 100% sunlight, all of these levels are correspondingly reduced and less venting is needed to maintain that perfect growing environment. Note, if the structure is tight, by closing the vents just before the end of photosynthesis, the SunCatcher can capture and store the excess CO2 plants exhale at the end of photosynthesis and provide this extra CO2 at the beginning of the next day. During late spring, summer, early fall, when average day and nighttime temperatures increase, additional natural convective ventilation can be achieved by leaving the north wall vents open. This also helps harden the plants before placing them in the garden. Now let's look at SunCatcher's patented profile, or what we might call the magic sauce. Light intensity varies widely from one area to another due to a variety of factors. The solar aperture can be enlarged to allow more sunlight in if needed. The north-facing roof should be at an angle of minimum for 45 degrees to as much as 60 degrees up from horizontal. The larger angle makes the south glazing higher and will capture more solar energy. The SunCatcher depth will be roughly equal to its height. The length of your SunCatcher should be at least twice the depth to ensure that all interior gets direct sunlight at least for half the day. The longer the SunCatcher, the more the area in the middle gets light all day. That is, not shaded by the east wall in the morning, nor by the west wall in the afternoon. For a larger footprint, we suggest using the same profile and making the structure longer while enlarging the upper vents and using exhaust fans. Thank you for letting us share our passion with you. Good news! We will post this seminar on our website for your ongoing review. It will be the first entry into the SunCatcher Passive Solar Greenhouse Design Library. Check it out. SunCatcher realizes designing and building a passive solar greenhouse requires a lot. So besides our educational website, we've developed several helpful products for your convenience. SunCatcher offers engineered quality blueprints for building your own 12 by 24 or 16 by 32 foot SunCatcher. Potential builders might consider a 12 by 24 or 16 by 32 SunCatcher EcoShell kit. The kit removes the guesswork, guaranteeing a high quality product and a shorter time for a lower total cost. Our smallest and most portable model, the SunCatcher Junior, has a 3 3/4 foot by 3 3/4 foot footprint. Its design distills over 40 years of high-end passive solar engineering and science into a compact, energy-efficient, stainless steel miniature greenhouse. A few square feet of sunny south-facing space is all you need to grow your own food year-round. Shipped to your home and easily assembled in your outdoor space. Decorate, paint, and personalize your beautiful SunCatcher Junior. Your kids and neighbors will love it.
Thanks for taking the time to learn more about our patented solar greenhouse design. We hope what we've shared here will be a part of the solution for food security for your family and community for generations to come. Be sure to check out our virtual SunCatcher booth in the fair's online marketplace, where you'll find a handout for this presentation, additional resources and discount coupons for our products. Thanks to the Common Ground Country Fair folks for this opportunity to share this most important work.